Billionaire dad sees black girl defend his disabled son from bullies. His next move shocks. He thought money could protect his son, but that day proved him wrong. In front of the entire school, his deaf, disabled boy was mocked while phones filmed. Then, one brave black girl stood up, fought off the bullies, and saved him, leading to a decision from his billionaire father that shocked everyone. In the grand hallways of Crestview Academy, polished floors reflected the confidence of the students who walked them, every step measured, every glance calculated. Yet, among the sea of designer shoes and polished uniforms, one boy moved differently. Daniel Whitmore, 10 years old, son of the billionaire Richard Whitmore, was meant to exude power and control. But Daniel carried none of that confidence. His walk was uneven, his shoulders hunched, his crutch tapping a nervous rhythm against the marble. The empire his father built meant nothing here. All that mattered were his weaknesses, and everyone could see them. The whispers followed him everywhere. Billionaire baby. Can't even walk straight? Laughter, sharp and cruel, echoed from corners. Teachers glanced away. Students raised phones. In this world, humiliation was entertainment, and Daniel was the main act. Across the cafeteria, quiet and steady, sat Amara Johnson. Her father cleaned these halls every day, invisible to most, but she was far from invisible. She moved with a controlled grace, her eyes scanning the chaos, her fingers resting lightly on her lunch tray. The students sneered at her worn shoes, her thrifted uniform, the old backpack slung over her shoulder. Charity girl, they called her, but she didn't flinch. Her calm was her armor, her silence a shield forged from years of knowing that strength wasn't always loud. Daniel watched her, noticing how she carried herself differently. While he shrank from the world, hiding behind his mother's memories and the thin protection of wealth, Amara had learned to face life's cruelties head-on. Her father, a martial arts instructor, had taught her discipline and patience, the kind of inner strength that didn't need applause or recognition. It was Thursday, and the cafeteria was alive with the energy of the end of the week. Trays clattered, laughter bounced off polished walls, and Daniel's entrance was like a signal flare for trouble. 3 boys, sons of lawyers and corporate titans, blocked his path. One of them smirked, kicked lightly, and Daniel stumbled. His tray flew, food splattering across the floor, juice soaking his shirt. The crowd erupted. Phones rose instantly, capturing every humiliating moment. Daniel froze, his hands gripping his crutch as if it could anchor him to invisibility. His face burned with shame, a shadow he carried every day. No one moved to help him. No one dared. Then a voice broke through the chaos. "Pick it up." Heads turned. The voice was calm, measured, carrying authority that didn't need volume. Amara stood, every step deliberate, approaching Daniel as if the cafeteria itself had parted for her. She bent down, lifted his tray, and returned it to him, her gaze holding the ringleader's, steady and unwavering. "You think strength is hurting someone who's already struggling?" she said, voice low but piercing. "That's not strength. That's cowardice." For the first time that year, the cafeteria fell silent. Phones still hovered, but the story had shifted. Daniel looked up, eyes wide, and realized he was no longer alone. The quietest girl in the room had just made the loudest statement. The cafeteria still buzzed with whispered shock. Phones hovered in midair, the glow of screens illuminating stunned faces. Daniel's hands shook slightly as he clutched his tray and crutch. He had never felt anyone stand up for him like this. Not teachers, not classmates, not even his father, who was always busy with deals and meetings that left little room for a 10-year-old's fears. And yet, here was Amara, standing calm and unwavering, as if the weight of the world rested lightly on her shoulders rather than crushing her. She returned to her corner quietly, picking up her lunch with precision as if nothing had happened. But everything had happened. The ringleader, Jason Marlowe, who had shoved Daniel moments ago, glared at her. He was tall, broad-shouldered, confident in his inherited dominance. He stepped closer, a challenge in his smirk. "So this is the charity girl," he sneered. "Going to babysit the billionaire brat now?" Amara didn't flinch. She lifted her gaze, eyes calm, measuring every movement. Her voice was steady, clear. "I'm not here for you," she said. "I'm here for him. And if you think strength is showing off, you've already lost it. The cafeteria fell into uneasy silence. Even the students who had been laughing couldn't hide the tension building like a storm about to break. Phones tilted closer, capturing every subtle shift. The way Amara's posture didn't waver, the quiet intensity in her eyes. Daniel stared at her, realizing that this girl, whom the world underestimated, carried something he didn't have: control, discipline, a power that didn't shout, but simply existed, and it was enough to command attention. Daniel remembered the nights before, sitting alone in his penthouse suite overlooking the city skyline, wishing his father would notice him, wishing he could feel protected, wishing he could just be normal. Wealth couldn't fix the loneliness, couldn't erase the cruel whispers, couldn't steady his crutch in the hallways where mockery awaited. And here was Amara, showing him that courage didn't come from money, but from presence, from choosing when to act and when to wait. Jason's friends, Connor and Bryce, shifted uneasily. The bravado they had worn like armor all year seemed to falter under the weight of Amara's calm. They exchanged glances, realizing that the quiet girl wasn't afraid. And fear, even subtle, has a way of silencing arrogance. But the moment wasn't yet over. Jason, still fueled by pride, reached to shove Daniel again. Daniel flinched, preparing for the humiliation that had become routine. Before anyone could react, Amara stepped forward, precise and fluid, intercepting the motion. She guided Jason's momentum, redirecting him into a harmless stumble, careful to protect Daniel while demonstrating control. The cafeteria collectively gasped. Phones tilted closer, capturing the moment that no one had expected. Jason's confident smirk faltered. He stumbled back, unsure, his power over the room evaporating under the weight of something he had never encountered. Discipline. Daniel felt a spark ignite within him. The crushing shadow of shame that had followed him for years seemed lighter, almost bearable. He straightened his shoulders, the tray in his hands no longer a burden, but a reminder that someone had his back. Amara returned his gaze and without words communicated, "You are not alone." And in that instant, Daniel knew the world could still surprise him. That sometimes the strongest shields weren't made of money, and the loudest voices weren't the ones who claimed the room. The quiet ones, the disciplined ones, the ones who stood with purpose, they were the ones who truly changed it. The cafeteria had shifted. Laughter no longer echoed freely, replaced by murmurs of disbelief. Phones hovered, recording every movement. Students leaned forward, sensing a storm. And at the center of it all, Jason Marlowe's pride had cracked. But arrogance, as it often does, doesn't surrender quietly. Jason's eyes narrowed. Connor and Bryce flanked him, their smirks forced now, their confidence shaken. "You think a girl can stop us?" Jason hissed under his breath, loud enough for a few nearby students to hear. "We'll show her who runs this place." Daniel felt the tension coil in his chest, the familiar dread rising like a tide. He had survived countless days of mockery, every shove and whisper building a wall around him, isolating him from anyone who might care. And now that wall was being tested again. But this time he wasn't alone. Amara's presence, calm and unyielding, radiated assurance. The first shove came swiftly. Jason lunged at Daniel, aiming for the humiliation of sending him sprawling. Daniel flinched, but before the contact could land fully, Amara moved. Her steps were measured, deliberate, fluid, a dance she had practiced countless times in her father's dojo, the rhythm of defense ingrained in her bones. She guided Jason's momentum, redirecting him so that instead of Daniel, he stumbled into a harmless stack of chairs. The cafeteria gasped. Phones tilted closer. The whispering grew into a collective murmur. "Did you see that?" Connor, feeling the shift, decided to intervene. He swung at Daniel, wild and uncontrolled, desperate to reclaim dominance. But Amara was faster. With one precise motion, she intercepted his leg, guiding it safely to the floor. No harm was done, but the message was clear. Aggression met discipline. Chaos met control. Bryce's phone slipped from his hand as he watched the scene unfold. The cafeteria, once a theater of mockery, now held a different performance, one of quiet power and calculated strength. Students stared, unable to tear their eyes away. The bullies' confidence faltered with every failed attempt to assert control. Daniel felt something stir within him. He straightened his back, the crutch no longer a symbol of weakness, but a reminder of the support standing beside him. Amara returned his gaze, unwavering, her silent communication clear. "Stand tall. You are not alone." Jason, frustrated and humiliated, charged again. He underestimated her, expecting fear or hesitation. But Amara was calm. Every motion precise, each step a demonstration of controlled power. She redirected his force, guiding him safely to the ground. The cafeteria erupted, not in laughter, but in awe. Whispers grew into chants. "She's trained! Look at her control!" For the first time, Daniel realized that courage didn't roar. It didn't need to shout or strike or dominate. Courage stood. Courage protected. Courage lifted those who were overlooked. And in that moment, the quiet girl beside him became more than just a defender. She became a guide, showing him the path to stand tall, not just in the cafeteria, but in life. The bullies, faces red with humiliation and disbelief, staggered to their feet. Their carefully constructed hierarchy had crumbled in the face of something they couldn't understand: discipline, control, and quiet strength. And as the crowd absorbed this, Daniel felt a flicker of hope he hadn't known in years. Perhaps, just perhaps, someone was finally on his side. Not because of money, not because of status, but because of character, courage, and heart. The cafeteria had become a different world. The polished floors reflected more than designer sneakers now. They mirrored the shock, the awe, the shift in power that no one had anticipated. Phones hovered, capturing the scene from every angle. The bullies, Jason, Connor, and Bryce, were no longer in control. Their dominance, built on fear and mockery, had been quietly dismantled by the calm, precise movements of Amara Johnson. Jason's face flushed, not with anger, but with disbelief. Every failed shove and misdirected swing made him smaller in the eyes of his peers. He had expected compliance, laughter, or at most, fear. Instead, he faced control, discipline, something he could not buy, steal, or intimidate into submission. Daniel watched, his heart pounding, as the girl he barely knew became a beacon of courage, proving that true strength didn't roar. But as the students absorbed the events, another presence entered the room, Vice Principal Sinclair. Her heels clicked sharply against the polished tiles, each step commanding attention. She scanned the cafeteria, eyes sharp, catching the tension in the air immediately. Phones tilted, students stiffened. The authority she carried had weight, yet even she paused when her gaze landed on Amara. Calm, steady, controlled, the girl's posture spoke louder than any words could. "Everyone, stop!" Sinclair's voice rang out. Conversation ceased. Phones lowered. The cafeteria held its collective breath. "I've received reports of violence today," she continued, voice measured but firm. "I want the truth now." Students shifted uneasily. Jason tried to reclaim the room with a smirk, but it faltered. Connor and Bryce avoided eye contact, and Daniel, standing slightly taller, felt a strange sense of pride and courage. He no longer felt invisible. He was seen, protected, and inspired by someone who refused to be silenced. Amara stepped forward, her calm presence filling the space between authority and chaos. She didn't shout. She didn't exaggerate. She recounted the events, each shove, each attempt at domination, and how she intervened only to protect Daniel, never to hurt. Her voice was steady, precise, unwavering. Every word carried the weight of truth and the quiet power of integrity. Vice Principal Sinclair listened, her expression unreadable. When Amara finished, the room stayed silent. Phones hovered, capturing the pause that felt like a collective heartbeat. Then Sinclair spoke, her voice slicing through the tension. "You acted with restraint, discipline, and protection. Violence without reason will not be tolerated, but intervention to protect the vulnerable will be recognized. Jason Marlowe, Connor Hale, Bryce Turner, your actions were unacceptable. Consequences will follow," the students, stunned, whispered among themselves. For the first time, hierarchy and arrogance had been challenged and found wanting. And Daniel, feeling the lift in his chest, realized that the world could indeed change. Not overnight, not magically, but through courage, presence, and the quiet decisions that defined character. As the crowd began to settle, Daniel turned to Amara. She simply nodded, a quiet acknowledgement of shared victory. He lifted his crutch, steady in his hands, and took a small but determined step forward. In that moment, the cafeteria was no longer just a place of fear and mockery. It had become a classroom of courage, a stage for integrity, and a reminder that the quiet ones often carry the loudest lessons. And somewhere deep inside, Daniel felt a spark of hope. Perhaps for the first time, he could truly stand tall. By the time the lunch bell rang, the cafeteria had transformed. What had started as a daily theater of humiliation had become a stage for courage, integrity, and quiet power. Phones still hovered, capturing every moment, but now the focus had shifted. Students no longer recorded mockery. They captured a lesson in control, strength, and empathy. Daniel Whitmore, once invisible and ashamed, felt something stirring inside him. Every shove, every cruel laugh he had endured seemed lighter now, as if Amara's presence had carried some of the weight for him. He straightened his back, adjusted his crutch, and even dared a small smile. The girl beside him had shown him what it meant to stand, truly stand, for oneself and for others. The bullies, Jason, Connor, and Bryce, retreated toward their table, faces red and eyes wide. Their usual confidence had evaporated, replaced by something unfamiliar: fear. Not the fear of punishment alone, but the fear of being seen for who they truly were, entitled, unkind, and hollow, without the approval of the crowd. The realization hit hard. Authority, when combined with truth and discipline, could topple even the loudest arrogance. Across the cafeteria, whispers began to spread. "Did you see her? She didn't even hit them. That's discipline." Phones zoomed in on every move, replaying the way Amara guided the bully's force without aggression, how she protected Daniel, and how she carried herself with unwavering calm. By the end of lunch, clips of the incident had begun to circulate, each edit highlighting the grace and precision of her movements, turning what was once a moment of fear into one of viral admiration. Daniel's gaze met Amara's again. She offered a small nod, quiet but powerful. No words were needed. The understanding between them was clear. Courage, he realized, wasn't loud. It wasn't flashy. It was steady, deliberate, and unwavering. And sometimes it came from the most unexpected sources. Meanwhile, the ripple effect began. Students who had once laughed now reconsidered their own actions. A few approached Daniel with tentative apologies, whispering quietly, unsure if he would accept. Others sought Amara's guidance, asking how she remained so calm under pressure. The cafeteria, once divided by wealth and fear, had shifted. Respect was no longer dictated by money or popularity. It was dictated by courage, integrity, and the willingness to stand for what was right. In a penthouse high above the city, Richard Whitmore watched the clips on his phone. Emails and contracts waited, but for the first time he paused. He saw his son not as the fragile boy he feared he had failed, but as someone standing tall, supported by a girl he had never noticed before. Amara Johnson, the janitor's daughter, had given Daniel something no wealth could: presence, protection, and belief. Richard's heart swelled with a mixture of pride and regret. Pride for Daniel's first real display of strength and presence, and regret for the years spent absent, thinking that money alone could shield his son from life's hardships. He typed a single message to Daniel: "I see you. Stand tall," and another to his assistant: "Cancel everything. I'm going to Crestview." Back in the cafeteria, the students watched as Daniel finally lifted his head, his shoulders straightened, and for the first time he walked not as a victim, but as someone who had been seen, protected, and inspired. The quiet girl who had stood beside him had not only defended him, but had given him the courage to reclaim himself. The lesson was clear. Strength wasn't about power, wealth, or fear. Strength was about standing up when it mattered, protecting the vulnerable, and refusing to let cruelty define the day. And in that moment, Daniel knew that everything had changed. By the end of the day, the story of the cafeteria incident had spread beyond the walls of Crestview Academy. Phones buzzed with notifications. Clips circulated across social media platforms, each replay showing Amara's calm precision, her discipline, and her unwavering protection of Daniel Whitmore. Hashtags like Stand Tall, Discipline over Arrogance, and Amara Johnson began trending. Students watched, replayed, and whispered among themselves, amazed that someone so quiet could carry such power without raising a hand in anger. Daniel, for the first time in years, felt a spark of pride. His shoulders were no longer slumped. His eyes lifted. The crutch he held was no longer a symbol of weakness, but a reminder that courage and support could transform fear into confidence. Amara's quiet guidance had given him more than protection. She had given him belief in himself. The following morning, the cafeteria held a new kind of tension. It was no longer just a room of students and food. It was a stage for accountability. Jason, Connor, and Bryce entered, their usual arrogance replaced with uncertainty. Their families, alerted by the viral clips, were present, faces pale with embarrassment. No longer could wealth shield them from the consequences of cruelty. Principal Harrington stood at the front, papers trembling in her hands, but her voice firm. Yesterday's incident has been reviewed with full evidence. It is clear that Amara Johnson and Daniel Whitmore acted in defense with restraint and courage. Jason Marlowe, Connor Hale, Bryce Turner, you will take responsibility for your actions, apologize, and reflect on the harm you have caused. The students watched as apologies were given, not for convenience, not for cameras, but for the first time, sincere and weighted by understanding. The cafeteria erupted, not in chaos, but in acknowledgement of integrity. Respect had shifted. Power had changed hands. And Daniel, standing tall beside Amara, understood the true meaning of courage. It was not the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. High above the city skyline, Richard Whitmore arrived at Crestview Academy. He found Daniel and Amara in the cafeteria, surrounded by students whispering awestruck commentary. He knelt beside his son, placing a steady hand on his shoulder. "Your mother always said someone would help you stand tall," he said quietly. Daniel smiled faintly. "She didn't just help me, Dad. She helped you too." Amara, observing from beside them, nodded. She had been underestimated, overlooked, and yet her discipline, training, and integrity had shifted the course of an entire room. The girl who had once been invisible had become a symbol of courage and controlled strength, teaching lessons far beyond physical prowess. That day, the halls of Crestview Academy were changed. Students who had relied on arrogance and cruelty learned that true strength came from restraint, from protecting the vulnerable, and from standing firmly in one's values. Daniel and Amara had done more than defend a bullied boy. They had reminded everyone that courage is not measured by loud words or money, but by the quiet, deliberate choices that define character, and in that quiet, steady presence, the students learned the most powerful lesson. Sometimes the calmest move can shake the loudest room. Sometimes the quietest ones are the ones who change the world. The cafeteria, once ruled by fear and mockery, had become a testament to courage, discipline, and hope. And Daniel, standing taller than he ever had before, knew that for the first time he was truly seen, protected, and inspired to stand tall, not just today, but for the rest of his life. If this story inspired you to stand up for what's right, don't let courage stay silent. Like, share, and subscribe, and let's give every child the strength to stand tall.